What if I told you that after March 31, 2025, Christianity as we know it would no longer exist? Not because it will vanish, but because it will undergo a transformation so profound that it will challenge everything believers once took for granted. Throughout history, faith has never remained static. It has risen, fallen, evolved, and been reborn. Now, at this pivotal moment, we must ask, will Christianity embrace its evolution, or will it resist, fracturing under the weight of its own fears? The archetypal transition is a phenomenon that occurs when collective consciousness undergoes a fundamental shift. Christianity, as a living tradition, is not immune to this process. Every belief system, culture, and ideology follows a path of birth, growth, decline, and transformation. March 31, 2025 may not be a date marked by external cataclysm, but it represents an inner shift, a symbolic moment when the Christian identity is called to evolve. This transition is not dictated by politics, social movements, or theological debates alone. Rather, it is an unfolding of something far deeper in the human psyche. Throughout history, religious traditions have served as the bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind, helping individuals find meaning in the vast unknown. Christianity emerged as a response to the spiritual hunger of its time, offering a path to salvation and inner transformation. It provided structure, myth, and rituals that connected individuals to the divine. Yet, over centuries, the symbols that once had transformative power risk becoming stagnant when they are no longer experienced directly, but are instead reduced to mere doctrines. The archetypal transition occurs when an old form of spirituality reaches a point where it can no longer contain the expanding consciousness of those who follow it. This is the challenge Christianity faces today. The modern world has shattered the medieval worldview, replacing it with scientific inquiry and secular reasoning. The mysteries that once lay beyond human comprehension have been pulled into the realm of logic and empirical evidence. Miracles, once accepted as signs of divine intervention, are now scrutinized under the lens of scientific skepticism. The collective mind is evolving, but this does not mean that spirituality is disappearing. Rather, the form it takes must shift to accommodate new understandings of reality. Christianity stands at a crossroads where it must either open itself to transformation or risk being relegated to the background of human history. The archetypal symbols within Christianity, redemption, resurrection, divine love, remain eternally relevant, but their interpretation must evolve. The figure of Christ himself represents a psychological truth, one that speaks to the deepest aspects of human nature. Christ as an archetype embodies the union of opposites, the reconciliation of the mortal and the divine, the suffering and the transcendence. These themes are universal and continue to be meaningful, yet they require a fresh understanding that resonates with contemporary consciousness. Many Christians today feel a disconnect between their faith and the world they live in. The rigid structures of religious institutions, once necessary for stability, now often seem like barriers to personal spiritual experience. The archetypal transition suggests that faith must move from external authority to inner realization. No longer can spirituality be sustained purely by external rituals and traditions. It must become a deeply personal, experiential journey. This is not a departure from Christianity, but a return to its original essence. The earliest Christians were seekers, mystics, and visionaries who experienced faith not as a set of imposed rules, but as an inner awakening. The question that arises after March 31, 2025 is whether Christianity will embrace this transition or resist it. Resistance will lead to further division between traditionalists who cling to the past and seekers who turn elsewhere for meaning. The archetypal transition does not mean abandoning the past, but integrating it in a way that allows faith to remain alive. Those who understand the depth of this transformation will recognize that Christianity must become less about rigid theology and more about direct experience with the divine. This means a shift from external worship to internal realization, from institutional control to individual spiritual growth. The transition also brings with it psychological consequences. Many Christians may experience a crisis of faith, questioning long-held beliefs as they confront a world that no longer reflects the narratives they once knew. This crisis is not a sign of weakness, but an essential part of the process. Just as individuals go through psychological transformations, shedding outdated aspects of the self to become more whole, religions, too, must undergo similar processes of renewal. Christianity must confront its own shadow. The elements of dogmatism, fear, and exclusion that have sometimes overshadowed its message of love and redemption. Only by doing so can it emerge renewed, capable of guiding the modern soul toward a deeper understanding of spiritual truth. March 31, 2025 is not an apocalyptic date. It is a symbolic marker of a greater shift already taking place. Whether this shift leads to renewal or stagnation depends on how deeply Christians are willing to engage with this transformation. Faith must move beyond external adherence and become an inward journey, where the divine is not merely worshipped, but encountered within the depths of the individual soul. The challenge of the modern psyche is a profound struggle that Christianity, like all long-standing spiritual traditions, must confront. The human mind has undergone immense transformation over centuries, shaped by advancements in science, technology, and philosophical thought. The way people understand themselves and the world around them has shifted dramatically from the medieval period, where religion was the dominant framework for interpreting reality, to the present era, where rationalism, empirical evidence, and psychological introspection have taken precedence. This shift has created an existential tension between faith and reason, between spiritual belief and scientific knowledge, leaving many individuals grappling with their religious identity in a world that seems increasingly disconnected from the metaphysical. Christianity once provided a comprehensive worldview that explained existence, morality, suffering, and the afterlife in ways that resonated deeply with the collective consciousness of its time. The stories, symbols, and doctrines of Christianity offered meaning and structure, guiding individuals through life's uncertainties. However, the modern psyche has become increasingly skeptical, demanding proof where faith once sufficed. The rise of scientific discovery has explained many phenomena that were once attributed to divine intervention, shifting the locus of authority from religious institutions to empirical knowledge. The cosmos, once seen as a divinely orchestrated realm filled with supernatural influence, is now perceived as a vast mechanistic system governed by physical laws. This shift does not mean that the spiritual dimension of life has disappeared, but it does mean that faith can no longer rely on the same unquestioned authority it once held. The modern individual is shaped by a world where psychological exploration and self-awareness play a crucial role. Concepts such as the unconscious mind, cognitive biases, and existential anxiety have introduced new ways of understanding human experience that often diverge from traditional religious explanations. Psychology has illuminated aspects of human behavior that were previously attributed solely to spiritual forces. Temptation, morality, guilt, and redemption are now explored through the lens of mental and emotional processes. This raises a difficult question: where does Christianity fit into this evolving landscape of human understanding? The challenge for Christianity is not merely an external one, imposed by science and secularism, but an internal one: how to reconcile its ancient wisdom with the realities of modern human experience. The traditional approach of rigid doctrine and moral absolutism struggles to address the complexity of contemporary life. The modern psyche is no longer satisfied with answers that require blind faith. It seeks a deeper, more integrated experience of spirituality that aligns with personal introspection and psychological insight. Faith, in this context, cannot simply be a set of inherited beliefs. It must become an active lived experience that speaks to the depths of individual consciousness. Many Christians today find themselves caught between two worlds. On one hand, they feel the pull of tradition, the comfort of the familiar narratives that have shaped centuries of spiritual thought. On the other hand, they recognize the need for a more expansive understanding that accommodates the complexities of modern existence. This internal conflict can lead to doubt, disillusionment, or even a rejection of faith altogether. However, rather than seeing this as a crisis, it can be understood as an opportunity, an invitation to move beyond superficial adherence to doctrine and toward a more profound engagement with spiritual truth. For Christianity to endure, it must acknowledge this shift in the human psyche and adapt accordingly. This does not mean abandoning its core teachings, but rather deepening them, allowing them to be explored in ways that resonate with contemporary consciousness. Faith must become less about external authority and more about internal realization. Spirituality must be experienced directly, not just as a set of rules to follow, but as a journey into the depths of the soul. Only by embracing this challenge can Christianity remain a relevant and transformative force in the ever-evolving landscape of human thought. The shadow within Christianity is an inevitable aspect of its long and complex history. Every great tradition, ideology, or belief system carries a shadow, a hidden counterpart, consisting of unacknowledged fears, contradictions, and unresolved conflicts. In psychological terms, the shadow represents the parts of the self that are ignored, suppressed, or denied, because they do not align with the idealized image a person or group wishes to maintain. Within Christianity, this shadow manifests in various ways, from historical dogmatism to internal divisions and struggles with doubt. The presence of this shadow is not a failure of faith itself, but a natural consequence of human nature interacting with spiritual ideals. The question is whether Christianity will confront its shadow or continue to suppress it, allowing it to grow in destructive ways. One aspect of Christianity's shadow is its historical rigidity. Throughout the centuries, institutional Christianity has often resisted change, fearing that adaptation might compromise its core truths. This resistance has led to divisions, reformations, and conflicts, as different groups sought to reconcile their evolving understanding of spirituality with the established doctrines of the past. The rigid structures that once provided stability have at times become barriers to growth, preventing the faith from evolving alongside human consciousness. In some cases, this rigidity has manifested as dogmatic intolerance, where questioning or deviating from prescribed beliefs was seen as a threat rather than an opportunity for deeper understanding. This tendency to suppress inquiry and complexity has contributed to a growing disconnect between the Church and the modern seeker, who longs for a more personal experiential faith rather than an imposed set of rules. Another significant aspect of Christianity's shadow is its struggle with power and authority. While the teachings of Christ emphasize humility, love, and service, history reveals moments where religious institutions have sought control, wealth, and influence, sometimes at the expense of the very principles they claim to uphold. This tension between spiritual purity and institutional power is an ongoing issue, as the Church continues to navigate its role in a world where authority is increasingly questioned. The psychological consequence of this shadow is that many individuals perceive Christianity not as a source of spiritual transformation, but as an institution more concerned with maintaining its influence. This perception contributes to the decline in religious participation, as people seek spiritual experiences outside traditional frameworks that feel disconnected from the deeper truths they yearn for. Beyond institutional issues, Christianity's shadow also exists within the individual believer. Faith often demands a confrontation with doubt, yet many religious traditions have historically treated doubt as dangerous rather than as a necessary step toward deeper understanding. This fear of questioning can lead to an internal split, where individuals suppress their uncertainties instead of integrating them into a more mature, authentic faith. The rejection of doubt as part of the spiritual journey creates a fragile belief system, one that may crumble when faced with the complexities of life. The unwillingness to engage with uncertainty prevents faith from deepening, leaving many adherents either clinging to rigid beliefs out of fear or abandoning faith altogether when it no longer aligns with their evolving understanding of reality. Christianity's shadow is also evident in its relationship with morality and human nature. The emphasis on sin and redemption, while central to Christian theology, has at times been distorted into an unhealthy relationship with guilt and shame. Rather than guiding individuals toward transformation, some interpretations of Christian teachings have fostered a culture of self-condemnation, where people view themselves as inherently unworthy, rather than as beings on a journey towards spiritual growth. This excessive focus on sin, rather than on healing and integration, can alienate individuals who struggle with their imperfections and seek a path of self-acceptance alongside their faith. When religious teachings create an environment where people feel trapped by guilt rather than empowered by grace, the faith becomes more about control than liberation. Recognizing the shadow within Christianity does not mean rejecting it or diminishing its value. Instead, it presents an opportunity for growth and renewal. Only by acknowledging these hidden aspects, its historical rigidity, struggles with power, fear of doubt and complicated relationship with morality, can Christianity evolve into a faith that is not only relevant to modern consciousness, but also true to its deepest teachings. The ability to confront and integrate the shadow is what allows individuals as well as spiritual traditions to move toward wholeness rather than fragmentation. Suppressing the shadow leads to stagnation and disillusionment, while facing it with honesty and openness paves the way for transformation and renewal. The death and rebirth of faith is a psychological and spiritual process that occurs when deeply held beliefs and religious structures no longer provide the same sense of meaning, requiring transformation rather than simple reinforcement. This process is not new. It has occurred throughout history whenever humanity reaches a point where old ways of thinking, worshipping, and understanding the divine no longer align with evolving consciousness. Christianity as a living tradition is undergoing such a transition. For many, the Christianity they once knew, defined by rigid doctrines, institutional authority, and inherited beliefs, is no longer sufficient in addressing the complexities of modern life. This can create a sense of crisis, where faith seems to be dying, but what is actually happening is an opportunity for renewal. The death of faith, in this context, does not mean the disappearance of Christianity, but rather the dissolution of outdated forms that no longer resonate with contemporary experience. This kind of death is necessary, just as the natural cycle of life requires death to make space for new growth. Historically, Christianity itself has gone through multiple transformations, from the early Jewish Christian communities to the rise of the Roman Catholic Church, from the Protestant Reformation to the various modern expressions of Christianity. Each of these shifts represented a kind of death and rebirth, where certain elements faded while others emerged in new ways to meet the spiritual needs of the people. Today, Christianity faces a similar moment where old structures, ways of thinking, and approaches to faith must give way to something more alive, personal, and relevant. For the individual believer, this process often begins with doubt and disillusionment. Many Christians find themselves questioning aspects of their faith they once accepted without hesitation. This is not a sign of spiritual failure, but rather an invitation to go deeper. The psychological experience of faith's death often involves a confrontation with long-held assumptions, leading to a period of uncertainty and even grief. People may feel that the certainty they once had is slipping away, leaving them in a space of ambiguity. This is similar to the dark night of the soul, a concept in Christian mysticism, where the individual undergoes a spiritual crisis that ultimately leads to a more profound connection with God. Rebirth, however, does not happen automatically. It requires an openness to rediscovering faith in a new way, one that is not based on external authority alone, but on personal experience and inner transformation. Many Christians who go through this process emerge with a faith that is not weaker but stronger, more integrated, more authentic, and less dependent on rigid structures. This kind of faith is not simply about believing in certain doctrines, but about experiencing the divine in a way that is deeply personal and transformative. It is a shift from religion as a set of rules to spirituality as a journey. For Christianity as a whole, rebirth means embracing the idea that faith must evolve rather than resist change. Many religious institutions struggle with this, fearing that adaptation means compromise. But throughout history, the most enduring spiritual movements have been those that were willing to embrace transformation rather than resist it. If Christianity is to thrive in the future, it must recognize that what seems like the death of faith is actually an invitation to something deeper and more profound. Instead of viewing doubt as a threat, it must be seen as a necessary step toward a more meaningful engagement with the divine. Instead of fearing the loss of traditional structures, there must be a willingness to reimagine how faith is lived, taught, and experienced. Ultimately, the death and rebirth of faith is not about abandoning Christianity, but about allowing it to become something greater than what it has been. Just as individuals grow by letting go of outdated aspects of themselves, Christianity must undergo its own transformation. The old forms that no longer serve must fall away, making room for a deeper, more authentic faith that speaks to the needs of the modern soul. This is not an end but a new beginning, where Christianity can rediscover its essence in a way that is not bound by fear of change, but empowered by the potential for spiritual renewal. The emergence of personal spirituality is a defining characteristic of the modern religious landscape, and it presents both a challenge and an opportunity for Christianity. For centuries, religious identity was largely shaped by institutions, traditions, and communal practices. People inherited their faith from their families, participated in structured rituals, and relied on religious authorities to interpret sacred texts and doctrines. However, the psychological and cultural evolution of humanity has led to a shift away from external religious authority toward a more personal, individualized approach to spirituality. This transformation is not a rejection of faith itself, but rather a reorientation, one that emphasizes direct experience, personal interpretation, and inner exploration. The modern individual, shaped by advancements in science, psychology, and global interconnectedness, seeks spiritual experiences that resonate with their unique journey, rather than conforming to rigid doctrines. This shift is partly driven by the increasing awareness that spirituality is not confined to any single religious tradition. Exposure to diverse beliefs, meditation practices, and alternative spiritual philosophies has led many people to explore a broader understanding of the divine that goes beyond institutional boundaries. While Christianity once held a central position in shaping moral and existential thought, it now competes with a wide range of spiritual perspectives, many of which emphasize personal experience over institutional belonging. One of the key aspects of this transition is the movement from external religious practice to internal spiritual awareness. Traditional Christianity often placed emphasis on church attendance, adherence to specific creeds, and participation in communal worship. While these practices remain meaningful for many, there is a growing number of individuals who feel that true spirituality cannot be contained within formal structures. Instead of viewing faith as something dictated by an external authority, they see it as a deeply personal relationship with the divine, one that is shaped by inner reflection, intuition, and direct experience rather than by institutional teachings alone. This shift reflects the broader psychological evolution of humanity, where self-awareness and personal growth are seen as essential components of a meaningful life. For many, this movement toward personal spirituality arises from a dissatisfaction with institutional religion's inability to address the complexities of modern life. The rigid structures of traditional Christianity often struggle to accommodate individual experiences, leaving people searching for answers outside the church. Issues such as mental health, existential anxiety, and the search for purpose require a more nuanced and personal approach than what many religious institutions have historically provided. As a result, people are turning to contemplative practices, mindfulness, and mystical traditions within Christianity itself, seeking a direct encounter with the divine, rather than relying solely on second-hand interpretations. This shift does not mean that Christianity is becoming irrelevant, but it does indicate that its future depends on its ability to embrace this personal approach to spirituality. Rather than resisting individual exploration, Christianity must find ways to integrate it within its framework. The mystical and contemplative traditions within Christianity, which have often been overshadowed by institutional doctrine, offer a path for this evolution. Figures such as Meister Eckhart, Saint John of the Cross, and Teresa of Avila spoke of direct encounters with the divine that transcended formalized religion. Their teachings highlight the possibility of a Christianity that is deeply experiential, rather than merely intellectual or dogmatic. The challenge for Christianity is to move beyond the fear that personal spirituality will lead to fragmentation or relativism. Instead, it must recognize that this shift is a natural progression of human consciousness, one that calls for a faith that is not imposed but discovered. The modern seeker does not want to be told what to believe. They want to experience the divine for themselves. If Christianity can embrace this shift and provide a space for individual spiritual growth, it will not only survive but thrive in a world where personal experience is valued above external authority. The key lies in balancing tradition with transformation, allowing faith to remain grounded while also being flexible enough to meet the spiritual needs of the present and the future. The role of Christianity in shaping the future of human consciousness is a question that extends beyond mere theological concerns and into the very nature of human psychological and spiritual evolution. Christianity, as one of the most influential spiritual traditions in history, has not only guided moral and ethical development, but has also played a crucial role in shaping how people perceive themselves, their purpose, and the universe. However, as human consciousness continues to evolve, the question arises, will Christianity adapt to this transformation and serve as a catalyst for deeper awareness, or will it resist the changes necessary for its continued relevance? Human consciousness is not static. It evolves over time, shaped by cultural, scientific, and philosophical advancements. Throughout history, people have moved from mythological thinking to rationalism, from religious dogmatism to personal spiritual exploration. This evolution has led to an increasing desire for direct experiences of the divine, rather than adherence to second-hand interpretations. Individuals today seek a spirituality that integrates with their personal growth, psychological well-being, and existential understanding rather than one that is dictated by external authorities. Christianity, if it is to play a role in this new era of consciousness, must recognize that faith can no longer be based solely on tradition and inherited beliefs. It must provide a direct path to inner transformation. One of the primary shifts in human consciousness is the growing awareness of the interconnectedness of all things. The traditional model of religion, which often emphasized separation between the human and the divine, between the saved and the unsaved, between the church and the secular world, is being challenged by a more holistic understanding of spirituality. Many people today recognize that their spiritual journey is not about escaping the material world, but about transforming their relationship with it. This shift aligns with some of the deeper, often overlooked teachings of Christianity itself. Ideas found in the mystical traditions that speak of unity, divine presence in all things, and the importance of inner transformation. If Christianity is to guide future consciousness, it must rediscover these aspects and emphasize them over rigid dogmatic structures. Another key aspect of evolving human consciousness is the recognition that spiritual truth is not confined to one tradition or system of belief. While Christianity has long positioned itself as the singular path to salvation, the modern world is increasingly aware of the deep wisdom present in many different spiritual traditions. This does not mean Christianity must abandon its identity, but rather that it must open itself to dialogue and integration with broader spiritual insights. The ability to acknowledge and engage with other perspectives without fear of losing its essence will be critical for Christianity's continued relevance in an era where people are no longer satisfied with exclusivist claims to truth. The future of Christianity will also be shaped by its ability to address the psychological and existential crises of modern humanity. Many people today struggle with meaninglessness, anxiety, and a sense of disconnection in a world driven by materialism and superficial pursuits. If Christianity can shift its focus from institutional power to providing deep spiritual nourishment, it will find new relevance. Rather than positioning itself as a system of belief that demands conformity, it must become a source of wisdom that guides individuals towards self-awareness, compassion, and inner transformation. The evolution of human consciousness is moving toward a state where spiritual realization is not about external adherence, but about direct, lived experience. Christianity has the potential to be part of this transformation if it embraces a vision that goes beyond rigid structures and opens itself to the unfolding journey of human awareness. If it can integrate its rich history with a forward-thinking approach to spirituality, it will not only survive, but will play a vital role in shaping the future of human consciousness. Christianity stands at the threshold of transformation, faced with a choice that will determine its future. The pressures of modern consciousness, the growing appeal of personal spirituality, and the inevitable confrontation with its own shadow demand that it evolve rather than retreat into rigidity. Faith must no longer be defined by dogma alone, but by direct spiritual experience, by a deep personal connection with the divine, and by the willingness to integrate both doubt and mystery into the journey. The death of outdated structures is not the end of Christianity, it is the beginning of its rebirth. Those who cling to the past in fear may find themselves left behind, while those who embrace this transformation will discover a faith more profound, more authentic, and more aligned with the expanding awareness of human consciousness. After March 31st, 2025, Christianity will not disappear, but it will no longer be the same. The question is not whether it will survive, but whether it will awaken.